Alright, so in this video I will show you how to make any camera cinematic. So if you like what you just saw, sit on tight, because after lots of research and practice, I'm going to be showing you the 3 main things you need to apply in order to make any camera look cinematic. I'm going to show you the behind scenes of the shots you saw in the beginning of the video, and we're also going to recreate some famous movie shots from scratch. We're going to cover framing, lighting, color grading, and some additional tips I think are going to be really helpful. Hope you like it. Let's go. All right, so this is the setup right here. I have the camera in an angle right there. I have this light bulb right on the top left corner to create separation in the front. And then I'm gonna be like just walking in the frame over there. You're gonna see it in just a minute. I was testing using that reflector, but it's not really good because there's a lot of wind and I don't have any means to kind of fix it. So it's moving and the shots are looking a little bit unnatural. All right, so now I'm gonna try with that fill. It's on the white side. I think it's gonna give me more, like a lot softer light going towards me. You'll see. All right, I think that turned out really good. So let's move on to the next shot, which is just me walking down the stairs. All right, so for the next shot, I have the camera facing up. So I'm gonna be just walking downstairs right there, backlit by the sun. I have no means to use the reflector. I think I would like to light up the shadows a little bit, but that's just how it is. All right, so now I'm gonna go upstairs to film the second shot. Any camera. Right, I think I have it. Excuse the stiffness. I'm just like that. And now let's move on to the next shots, which are gonna be indoor. All right, so now I'm gonna try to replicate these shots, but over here. Right now it's just a mess, but I'm gonna try to arrange it as best as possible to match as much as I can. Obviously, I don't have the same clothes he has to hang on the background, etc. But this is the before and after. All right, so this is my setup. Here's the camera. I have these diapers or whatever it's called bag, which is red, just like we have here. And as you can see, there's a very strong light, which is supposed to be, I think, the bathroom's light. So I set it up over here. Wasn't easy at all. Had to unmount and mount a lot of things and move. It's not fun. Here's a chair. I just bent a blanket in here, which is blue, like the one there is. Folded or covered the window, and that is not showing in the frame. And this green pant, just to fill up the frame a little bit more and lead towards me, just like it's happening here. So now let's see what it looks like. I'm gonna get dressed up now, right after setting everything up, because I didn't want the same thing to happen as the previous shots. This is the last one. Hope you like it. Holy jeez. Hope you like it. Let's go. All right, so everything's kind of set up for the last shot, which is gonna be this one I'm showing you right now on the screen. And basically I'm just gonna walk in, lay down on the couch and just hang out. As you can see, I have my key light in here I haven't watched the movie. I probably will watch it while I'm editing, but I guess the light he's getting is motivated by either a ceiling light or the TV, and it's a top-down shot, so I set up the camera as much as I could. Because I don't have another C-stand, I just have one, and that one is already being used for my key light, and I just did, instead of a 90-degree angle, it's like, I don't know, like a 70-degree, something like that. But I think it's gonna work just fine. Here is just field lights, just to lift up the shadows a little bit. And excuse, the couch is not gonna be as pristine as in the movie, because I have two little babies that do everything you can imagine and more on that couch. Let's do it. Forgot to get this lens, so let's do it one more time. All right, so that was the last shot. So we can now go upstairs to start color grading, which is my next tip. Right, so in a nutshell, what I did was first filter the clips by the no clip color, which means just the clips that I had recorded on the camera, because these ones that have this orange dot are the ones that I recorded on the iPhone, which is basically just the BTS. So you go up here to clips, clip color, no clip color, and those clips are gone, leaving me with just the clips that are recorded on the camera. And I applied a Rec 709 conversion to all of them by clicking the last one. Now I have added some other clips as B-roll, which I hadn't before. And you press Shift and click on the first one, and all of them will be selected. And then just right click and click on apply grade, and it will apply the same grade to all of them. I won't do it now, of course, because I have a specific grade for each of the clips. So for this clip, I scrubbed through it to see more or less what I wanted to do. And I usually start with color, balance, and contrast, which is these two nodes we have here. This is color boost, I think. And this is contrast, which is just contrast by curves. Then I went to the HSL to kind of change the saturation and intensity of some colors, and also the hue. Then we control some of the highlights. Then we increased some of the saturation using the HSV, which is basically just coming here to the color space HSV, and then also disabling channel 1 and channel 3. And when you come here, the gamma and the gain are gonna add saturation using the subtraction method, which makes it look a little bit more cinematic. Then I control the saturation because I thought it was too much saturated. And this is a technique that I learned from Motion VFX. As you can see, it's doing really much to the footage, which basically just creates a lot of separation between everything you've already done. And that's done here in the color warper. In this section, you select these push arrows, and it's gonna separate whatever you press. So as you can see, this did a lot. If you want to see more, you can see that course. And if you want a more in-depth explanation of what I did here, like a color grading session in a video, let me know and I can do it. Then I just added a matte. You add a matte by just right-clicking on one of the nodes and click on Add Matte and select it, and it will create this node. And then you just drag one of the blue outputs to one of your nodes, and that basically means that it is selecting kind of the black and whites. That's what I think. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. But what it does is that instead of selecting the whole image, it just selects the higher contrast areas. And then I just decreased the contrast on those areas, as you can see, to have a softer look as the one we see. And then at last, I just added a vignette and lower the gamma on the outside to kind of focus the sight on the subject, which is me. Right, so this is the before and after, before and after. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the next section, which is basically just me explaining all the shots and what we can learn from each of them. Hope you like it. Keep on watching it. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is, and there are three main things we want to keep in mind when we talk about framing. The first one is always film the shadow side, and this falls in the middle of lighting but also framing, because it's where you're going to position your camera in relation to light. For example, in this case, I have a light right there on my left, kind of giving a 45-degree angle, and the camera is on the opposite side. It's not right where the light source is, and I can show you the difference right now. This is if I had the light in the same direction as the camera is, you can see the difference. And the thing is that the human eye can see more difference, is more sensitive to the shadows than to the highlights. So that's why it creates more depth and it feels more interesting. And I put it back. The second thing we want to keep in mind when we talk about framing is the rule of thirds, which is basically arranging the frame so that everything falls into the intersections of those 2x2 rows. For example, I'm the subject in this case, and I'm in the right side of the intersection with my eyes close to that upper intersection. And then on the left side, I have this couch with that heart that also creates color contrast, which is something we're also going to talk about. Now, this is not always the case. You don't always have to follow the rule of thirds. It will depend on many factors, but in most of the cases, you either want to be on one of the sides or in the middle of the frame, unless you want to transmit a different feeling. And the third we want to keep in mind when we talk about framing is the foreground and background separation. So as you can see, I'm here, the couch, which serves as background, and these other elements I have here serve as the background, and they are way far from me, thus creating this separation, this shallow depth of field, and feels more cinematic. Now let's move on to the next topic, light. The first key thing we want to keep in mind when we talk about light is what is most common, or the most popular lighting is the 45-degree angle, because it creates kind of a Rembrandt light, and it's basically a triangle of light that falls on this right cheek. I'm not able to check so well in here because it's not my main setup. I'm in my friend's house and I cannot see the monitor and how the light is placed, but I think it's on a 45-degree angle in creating this triangle or Rembrandt light. As I mentioned before with framing, this is just the most common and the most used, but it doesn't mean that you always have to use it. It will depend a lot on the feeling you want to transmit and your creativity. The second thing we would like to use when we talk about lighting is a fill light. In this case, I have a light right here that has a different color temperature that is filling my background, so it also creates color separation. We could also have placed a light in here, or we're using the window in this case, or in here. We usually use it in one of the rule of thirds intersections. It all depends on your taste, but I prefer to use a warmer light so it matches my skin tone, and also talking about color separation. Or if we want to create more color separation, we can use teal or bluish light or green, depending on the look you're looking for. Another good practice is using a hair light or a backlight. As you can see on most of the shots I showed you in the beginning of the video, when we get against the sun, for example, it kind of creates a backlight, which also gives the scene kind of a 3D look and makes it feel more interesting and dynamic. When talking about color contrast, we can use lights, as I said, setting the lights on different temperatures. For example, this one, it's pure white light. It's like 5,600, and this one on the left side, casting the background, is at 2,500 Kelvin, which is supposed to make the background more yellowish than me. And the last point to keep in mind when we talk about lighting is the exposure. You never want to be overexposed or underexposed. That's something that you should pay a lot of attention to, because if you overexpose the image, you're not going to get the details and the color contrast you might be looking for, and the image is not going to be as pleasing as when you have the right exposure. So that's something you should dedicate a good quality time to investigate and fine-tune the art of the exposure. In this case, I hope that none of the windows are blown out, neither I am blown out, and I'm supposed to be in the perfect middle gray exposure, maybe just one step above, which I can lower down later in the color grading step. And that's something to keep in mind as well. It's almost always best practice to expose to the right or expose a little bit above of the perfect exposure, because then you can lower it down in post without introducing noise, instead of increasing the exposure in post, which will actually introduce noise to the image, which we don't want. So now we're about to move to the color grading part, but before, let me give you a bonus tip. When you talk about color contrast, it's not something that we just create with lights and color grading. That's something that is also designed on set. So as you can see by my clothes, this shirt is the same color as the couch, or it's a very similar color. So that's why I placed that gray scarf. I think that's how it's called. So it creates color contrast between that and me. And I have this color matching the couch and this color matching the scarf. Whereas as if I was just using the shirt, it will blend with the couch and it wouldn't create the color contrast we're looking for. Now, talking about lighting, I want to thank Magic Mind for enlightening my brain with their magic formula. So if you're like me and have 100,000 ideas in your brain but cannot materialize them because of lack of energy, focus, or it stresses you so much that you end up procrastinating and endlessly postponing them, Magic Mind could be a lifesaver for you. It's meant to be drank alongside your coffee, but I've been drinking it mostly alone since I'm not really a coffee person, and when I drink it with coffee, I feel like the squirrel in the movie Over the Edge. So if you want to boost your productivity over the roof in a natural and healthy way, check out Magic Mind in the link in the description. Now let's move on to the third key thing we need to implement in order to get those cinematic shots, which is color grading. When we talk about color grading, we want to keep color contrast, as I have mentioned several times already in this video, either making the background a different color than the foreground, or the contrast a little bit higher on the subject than the background, or vice versa. For example, in these scenes where we're in nature and the nature is green, if we have a human subject, like in this case, we want to set the tone a little bit more towards red, so it creates that color separation. And in this other example where I'm indoors, I am setting it more towards a teal and orange look. So the background is bluish or tealish, and I'm more kind of in the orange color spectrum. Something else we want to keep in mind when color grading and also when lighting is that we don't want our shadows to be purely black in most of the cases. So we want to lift them up by using also a fill light, a reflector, or something so that we retain information in our shadows. And that's something also we can tweak a little bit when we're in color grading by just lifting the shadows, either using the lift in the main color wheels or the shadow in the log wheels. When we lift the shadows in the log wheels, it kind of creates a more smooth transition between the shadows and the midtones. So that's usually what you want to go for. All right, so now let's go to the office so I can show you the color grading process I went through with the shots you saw in the introduction of this video. Some additional tips you want to keep in mind is to mostly shoot on your native ISO if possible. In this case, I'm using the Lumix S5iiX, and it has two native ISOs, the 640 and the 4000, and that basically reduces at the minimum the amount of noise that it's going to be captured by the sensor. That fly. Another bonus tip is to look for inspiration. In this case, I went to a free website called FrameSet, where I looked for some stills from movies that could serve as inspiration or for me to try to emulate them in my own house. This will help you choose angles, light intensity, light position, color contrast, etc. for your shots from top cinematographers that have much more experience than us. And the last one is practice makes perfect. So the more you practice, the more of an expert you're going to become. So instead of just choosing not to create because you think it's not as good as you were expecting it to be, try to practice as much as possible. And I'm telling you because it has happened to me a lot of times that I have something in my head that I'm not able to materialize or that doesn't turn out the way that I'm expecting it to be. And I just end up leaving the project and not completing it or not posting it. But what I've noticed is that when I move on and I post it and I notice those mistakes, then I can fix them in the next project and thus kind of continue polishing this art. All right, so that's it for today's video. I hope you liked it. If there's anything I missed or anything you want me to mention in the next video, you know where to ask me, and subscribe to the channel so you stay tuned for the next videos. See you in the next one.